Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thanks for being here. Mr. Mungie, if I could just start with you, I just want to make sure I understood your answers to my colleagues, including Senator Cruz. Let me just read you something. I just want to know if you agree with this or not. This should be simple. Here's a statement. The demand to center Israel's right to self-defense, that's in scare quotes, self-defense, erases the colonial context and delegitimizes the Palestinian right to resistance. We are in awe of the Palestinian struggle to resist violent occupation, removal, erasure, and the expansion of Israeli settler colonialism. Do you agree with that, yes or no? I realize you didn't write it, and you may not know who the author is, may never have heard of these people before. I just want to know, does this represent your view, yes or no?
Senator, any attempt to justify what happened on October 7th, I have absolutely no...
Well, that's not the context here. This is talking about any discussion of Israel's right to self-defense erases the colonial context. It's calling Israel a colonial state. So could we just answer my question? Do you agree with this, yes or no?
Senator, I don't claim to be an expert on the Middle East. I don't have the historic or regional expertise.
Sounds like a maybe. That's a maybe? Maybe you agree? Can we get a yes or a no?
Each say this is a policy question or a question for foreign experts.
Wait, that's what I don't understand. By the way, this was written by the director of the center you sat on the board of, that you advised. This is the director, not some random professor, the director, who published it in an open letter. So when you say it's a policy, what's the policy about calling Israel a violent settler colonialist state? Why is that a policy question?
Senator, that is not a statement that I had any involvement with.
Okay, good. So would you condemn it then? You say this does not represent your views.
Senator, I have no basis as a judicial nominee to cast views on the Middle East or what does or does not happen.
This is what you're not answering my question. I'm asking you whether this individual who said that Israel was a violent settler colonial state, I'm just trying to get you to say, do you agree with that or not? And I've asked you now 4 different times, 4 different ways. You're not answering me. Why is that? Why can't you just say, no, I don't agree with this? Let's try again.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this statement, yes or no?
Senator, in order to agree or disagree with any statement, I need to have a sufficient factual background to assess it.
So in other words, you can't say whether or not Israel is a violent colonial state. You think that's a difficult question?
Oh, God. That is not an issue with which I have any expertise.
Is the Holocaust also a difficult question? Does that need context?
No.
Is that a policy question?
I am quite happy to address the Holocaust, Senator.
Why aren't you happy to address this then? Why is it that an individual in the center that you directed who calls Israel a violent colonialist state, those are racist comments, why can't you condemn that? I don't understand it. You won't answer my questions, you won't answer Senator Cruz's questions, you wouldn't answer Senator Kennedy's questions. I don't understand why this is complicated.
Senator, I'm Pakistani. I didn't grow up in the Middle East.
I didn't either. I didn't either, but that doesn't mean that I can't say that somebody who says that a Jewish state is a violent colonialist enterprise is wrong. This isn't a policy question, it's a moral question. This is a moral issue.
Senator, I am not in a position to make any policy pronouncements about actions in the Middle East.
Does Israel have a right to exist?
Yes.
Should American Jews be safe in their homes and on their campuses?
Senator, there is
Just
no
yes or no, please. Spare me the lectures. Yes or no? Did you advise against this letter? You sat on the advisory board. Did you advise against it?
I never even heard of that letter.
How is that possible? What did you do on this board for all these years? This was years before you left it.
It's an advisory board that met once a year to talk about academic research.
Do you not think it's relevant to the setting in the academy that Jewish students might feel unsafe when they have a tenured professor who's the director of a center saying that Israel is a violent colonialist state? Do you think that may not have an effect on the educational environment?
Senator, I abhor.
But you didn't care to look into it?
May I respond?
But I've heard your answers, and they're all move over here, look over here. You're not answering any of my questions. And I can't figure out why. I can't figure out why you won't just say that this was wrong. So you didn't advise against it, you didn't condemn it, you didn't look into the center's activities. Do you regret that? Do you regret not at the time taking a moral stand against these frankly racist condemnations of Jewish Americans, Jewish people in the state of Israel? Do you think it was wrong for you to be silent?
Senator, I didn't know anything about
Why
it.
didn't you? Didn't you have a moral obligation to know about a center that you sat on the board of for years, whose director was calling Jewish people colonialist, violent settlers? Do you not have a moral obligation to know and say something?
That is not the function of an academic advisory board, but I abhor
But it
any
is the function
anti-Semitism.
of a responsible jurist and a responsible citizen. And I would just suggest to you that you failed it. And your inability to just say, this was wrong, this shouldn't have been said, this kind of language and rhetoric is what has led directly to Jewish American students now being called out on campuses, in classrooms, told to stand up and go and stand in a corner because they need to feel what it's like to be colonized. I'm sure you've seen the reports of this happening across the country. This is happening now.
Senator, your time's expired. Mr. Manji, would you like to complete an answer?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Any acts of anti-Semitism or any bigotry, including anti-Muslim bigotry, on college campuses is abhorrent. My children will be going to university soon. I want them to feel safe, and I want the children of my Jewish friends and colleagues to feel safe too.
Well, you think you'll take a greater interest when your children are on campus, maybe, than you did for the last 3 years?
Senator, your time has expired.
Mr. Mangi, last week, the American people were horrified to watch the testimony of the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn, where all three of them failed to speak clearly denouncing anti-Semitism. All three of them had difficulty, in fact, refused to say that calls for genocide of the Jewish people constitute harassment at their policies. One of those three presidents has since resigned. I think the other two are likely to resign and should resign. I will say, when I look at your record, I am troubled by a number of things, but I am perhaps most troubled by the fact that you served as an advisory board member for the Center for Security, Race, and Rights at Rutgers Law School from 2019 to 2023. And sadly, I think that center embraces the same extremism and myopia that we saw on display from the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn. While you were a board member, on May 29th, 2021, Professor Sahar Aziz, who's the director of the center on which you served as an advisory board member, signed a letter which was posted on the center's website, which read, quote, "A ceasefire does not end the colonial conditions of the structural violence and inequality that Palestinians live under." It goes on to say, quote, "The Palestinian rights to freedom, security in their homes, to return, self-determination, and to be free of violent occupation are well established under international law. The language of both-sidedness, of timeliness, or religious conflict, with moments of escalation, erases the military, economic, media, and diplomatic power that Israel, as an occupying force, has over Palestine." Do you agree with those sentiments?
Senator Cruz, let me say first, with regard to the genocide issue that you raised, any calls for genocide of any people are absolutely horrific, horrific. And there could be nothing that is more contrary and antithetical to everything that I stand for. Now,
Good.
with regard to the center, as I mentioned earlier, I served on an advisory board. Its function was to meet approximately once a year and to focus on what areas of academic research at Rutgers Law School might be productive to engage in. For example,
So you signed up to be on an advisory board and you just didn't know what they were doing? You just didn't treat the responsibility very seriously?
the responsibility, Senator, was to advise on areas of academic research, not
So I
on the
want to
day-to-day.
return, you're a practicing lawyer, I want to return to the question I asked.
Yes.
Which is, do you agree with the sentiments that I just read you from the director of the center on whose advisory board you served?
Senator, I have no knowledge of that speech or statements that
Do
you're
you
referencing.
believe that Israel is an occupying force in Palestine?
Senator, the history of that region is very complex, and I don't claim to be an expert in it.
All right, let me ask you this. Same letter posted by the same director, quote, "We are in awe of the Palestinian struggle to resist violent occupation, removal, erasure, and the expansion of Israeli settler colonialism." Do you agree with that sentiment?
I'll give you the same answer, Senator,
You don't know?
which is that is a very complex history in
Complex.
the
It
region.
means context?
No, it means it is a history that is the domain of policymakers.
So no, it is not. Israel is not a violent occupier engaged in settler colonialism. That is a political statement, and you are unwilling to disagree with it, which suggests there's a reason you were on that board. There was a reason. It's actually quite remarkable that you're not even willing to disclaim the statement, "We're in awe of the Palestinian struggle to resist in light of October 7th.
Senator, I stated this earlier, but let me repeat it because I think it's critically important.
Do you condemn the atrocities of the Hamas terrorists?
Yes, that's what I was about to address, Senator.
And
The
is there
events-
any
answer the
justification?
question.
Is there any justification for those atrocities?
Senator, I'll repeat myself. The events of October 7th were a horror involving the deaths of innocent civilians. That is
I'm going to ask
contrary.
the question again. Is there any justification for those atrocities?
That was going to be my next sentence, Senator, which is I have no patience, none, for any attempts to justify or defend those events.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think about the fact that the center on whose board you served hosted on the 20th anniversary of September 11th an event with a convicted terrorist who pleaded guilty? Dr. Sami al-Iranian was convicted of conspiracy to contribute services or benefits to a terrorist organization, and Dr. Hatem Bazian explicitly called for intifada against the United States. Do you agree with those sentiments?
Senator, I'd like to say two things on that point. Number one, on 9/11, I was in New York. I saw what happened. It was my city that was attacked. Number two, I've never heard of this event prior to today. It was never brought to the advisory board, which meant once a year to talk about academic issues.
Are you willing to denounce the center on whose board you served inviting a convicted terrorist, a supporter of Palestinian Islamic Jihad? By the way, Palestinian Islamic Jihad participated in the October 7th atrocities. Are you willing to condemn their inviting a supporter of their to attack America and to support the reasons for the September 11th attacks?
Senator, I don't think anyone can feel more strongly about what happened on 9/11 than someone who was there, who saw with their own eyes smoke billowing from their
But
towers.
you won't condemn this.
I
Senator,
will,
let him complete his answer, would you? Your time
He's
is expired.
filibustering and not answering
He's not
questions. And so I'm going to ask him to
filibustering.
answer the question I ask instead of giving a speech on a different topic. And Mr.
cannot-
Chairman, you do this all the time.
I do.
When a question is going badly for a Democrat witness, you jump in and try to save the witness. He knows how to answer a question. When I ask a question, he gives a speech on a different topic because he doesn't want to answer it. My question is simple. Do you condemn this event that was celebrating Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Yes or no?
You should not bully the witnesses nor try to bully members of the committee.
Asking a question is not bullying.
Complete your answer, please.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I'll answer your question very directly, Senator Cruz. I will condemn without equivocation any terrorism, any terrorist, or any act of terrorism, or any defense of any act of terrorism. I don't know.
This event?
I don't know anything about this event or who these people are. I've never heard of any of them. If someone on there is a terrorist, I condemn them.
Ms. Berner, you didn't tell Senator Graham the truth, did you?
Senator, I took an oath to tell the truth, and I have done so faithfully.
Now, on February 22nd, 2018, you spoke to the American Constitution Society. And this is what you said. The right to work movement is deeply racist. You said that, didn't you?
Senator, I do not have that speech in front of me. I have spoken on a number of occasions about the
You
history.
turned your notes over to us. You didn't read them before you turned them over?
Senator, I've spoken on a number of occasions about the history. I was not speaking
Are you
about.
saying that you didn't say that?
Senator, I've spoken on a number of occasions about the
Yes, ma'am,
history.
are you saying that you didn't say that?
I have turned over all of my notes from my
I
speeches.
don't think you're telling the truth, Ms. Berner. Let me ask you another question. Do you remember Mindy Sturgey?
No, sir, I do not remember.
I'm embarrassed you don't remember her. She was one of your union members. She alleged that she was the victim of sexual discrimination at one of your local unions. This is what she said. She alleged that one of the executives there asked her, quote, if she enjoyed rough sex and bondage. She said that the chapter president, Mr. Dave Regan, asked her, quote, does the carpet match the drapes? And, quote, what would you do for some jewelry? She alleged that Mr. Regan told another staffer, quote, that the only way she is getting a job is if she sucks my member of the male anatomy. Another employee said in an affidavit that Mr. Reagan, quote, went around asking women if he could sniff their panties, close quote, at an October 2017 work party. She said another executive, quote, grabbed my upper thigh while I was driving. And she wrote you and asked you to investigate. And you said no, didn't you?
Senator, I have dedicated my career to representing women and families. That has been my work.
You said no, didn't you?
Senator,
You told her that let her own chapter represent or investigate its own misconduct, didn't you?
Senator, I'm going to give you additional time, but I want the witness to be able to fully answer the question.
Senator, the letter that you are quoting from, I wrote in my capacity as counsel to my client. It was the position of my client, and I was acting as an advocate.
You refused to investigate, though, didn't you?
Senator, I believe that I have faithfully adhered to my obligations as an attorney for my client.
I don't think Ms. Sturgis would agree with you. In fact, Mr. Reagan, the chapter president, is still the president, isn't he?
I
You don't
believe
even know?
Dave Reagan is the president of one of our local union, of one of
Wow.
SEIU's local unions, yes.
Wow. Mr. Mangy. I just want to be sure I understand your testimony, sir. And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
From 2019 to 2023, you were a board member of the Center for Security, Race, and Rights at Rutgers Law School. Is that right?
I was a member of an advisory board, Senator.
Right. Most boards advise, don't they?
Well, Senator, boards of directors govern an institution. Advisory boards do not have a governance role. They merely provide counsel.
Do you know of any boards that don't offer advice?
Well, they're different in their legal function.
Okay. Y'all held an event on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attack on America. You held an event on the 20th anniversary attack, 9/11 attack on America. And you invited as speakers. Your first speaker was Dr. Sami Al-Arian. He was convicted of conspiring to provide material support, convicted in a court, to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And the Islamic Jihad participated in the October 7th massacre and mass rape. Your second speaker was Dr. Rahab Abdul-Hadi, who has organized panels for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. One terrorist, Leila Khalad. Ms. Khalad hijacked planes. You invited her as a speaker, or her mentor as a speaker. The third speaker you invited, Mr. Hatim Bazilian, was the co-founder of Students for Justice in Palestine and has publicly called for an intifada in the United States. Is this the way you celebrate 9/11? Have I said anything that was inaccurate?
Yes, Senator.
Tell me.
Senator, my involvement with the center at Rutgers Law School, which is a preeminent law school in the state of New
I
Jersey,
can tell.
is on an advisory board that, when my role was limited to providing advice on academic areas of research, primarily through a meeting held once a year. With regard to the event that you are describing, I've never heard of that event prior to today. It was never presented to the advisory board that I was part of. I know nothing about it. I know nothing about the speakers. I've never heard of any of those people.
How
So-
could you sit on an organization that would invite these terrorists, convicted terrorists, Counselor?
Senator, it is an advisory...
You didn't resign.
Senator, I never heard of that event until today. It is an advisory board where my role...
So you just had an epiphany today?
Senator, your time has expired.
May I
Would
respond?
you like to complete your answer?
Yes. I have never heard of this event prior today. It had nothing to do with my role on an advisory
But you're on the board.
Senator Klobuchar,
board.
Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to both of you. Ms. Berner, is that right? Got your name right there? Good.
Yes, sir.
I understand you're a general counsel for SEIU, one of the largest unions in the country. I understand representing interests that I have made disagreement with is not disqualifying by any means, and advocating positions I may disagree with falls in that category as far as I'm concerned. In terms of things you have advocated for, have you advocated for collective bargaining rights for prisoners?
Senator, I have not.
Okay. Have you advocated that 40% of all large corporate boards be designated for worker representatives?
Senator, I have not come across that issue.
So the positions that I'm talking about, you're not aware of?
Senator, the Service Employees International Union represents 2 million working Americans in every state in the country. The union takes positions on a broad range of issues. I've served as counsel to the union and represented the union.
Are you familiar with a working group at Harvard called Clean Slate for Working Power, Building a Just Economy and Democracy?
Yes, I am, Senator.
Were you part of that group?
I was invited to participate in several meetings of that group,
Are you
yes.
familiar with the product that they created?
I am, Senator.
Are you familiar that they advocated labor rights for prisoners?
I know that that report is quite voluminous, and
Well, I mean, it's a simple question. That's one of the, do you understand they recommended 40% of the corporate board seats be controlled by workers?
Senator, I participated in several meetings of that group. I did not.
That doesn't jump out at you? Okay. Have you ever said something to the effect that, excuse me, at its core, the right to work movement is deeply racist?
Senator, I believe that in a number of speeches that I gave in my capacity as general counsel of SEIU, I spoke about,
I mean, did you say that?
Senator, I believe I spoke about the historic.
No, that's not, I'm asking, did you say at its core the right to work movement is deeply racist? Because my state is a right to work state. You're going to be on the Fourth Circuit.
I spoke about the historic roots of the
Can
right
you
to
tell me
work.
yes or no that you said this? I mean, you either said it or you didn't.
The speech that you were referencing was a
Never
speech.
mind. Mr. Manji, are you familiar with the Center for Security, Race, and Rights at Rutgers Law School?
I am, Senator.
Okay, were you on that board?
I was on an advisory board.
Yeah, advisory board from 2019 to 2023.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with a symposium on the 20 years since 9/11, whose narrative, the exceptionalism of 9/11, is a panel talking about 9/11 20 years later?
I'm not familiar with that, Senator, no.
Okay, you don't know anything about it?
No, Senator, I was on an advisory board which met once a year, and its goal was to talk about what areas of academic focus would be useful for the
You're
Senate.
not aware that the board that you're advising was one of the co-sponsors whose narrative 20 years later that had panelists, including someone who was convicted for providing support to Islamic Jihad.
Senator, I've never heard of that event. I don't know anything about it. This was not a board of directors. This was an
No,
advisory board.
I'm just trying to figure out the board you're advising. They had 3 people. One was convicted, conspiring to support Islamic Jihad, a terrorist group. The other supports a group that featured the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and Leila Khalid was the speaker. The other panelist, Mr. Bazine, was the co-founder of Students for Justice in Palestine, who has publicly called for an intifada in the United States. You don't know anything about this.
Senator, I don't know any of those people. I don't know anything about that event.
Does it seem like this is representative of the positions of the institute we're talking about? Are you shocked to find out they would do this? Now I want to introduce into the record the panelist.
Senator, this,
Would you, I don't want to belabor it, would you condemn this symposium and the people that were on it?
Senator, I have,
Because a Jewish member of the New Jersey delegation, what's his name? Josh Kutheimer was very upset. And he said it was, and the Anti-Defamation League condemned the whole symposium. Would you condemn it?
Senator, I don't know any of these people or that event. I certainly and unequivocally
Okay.
would condemn any terrorism or any people associated with it.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce this in the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you for being here. Ms. Berner, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. In March of 2020, would have been just before the COVID pandemic, changed all sorts of things that year. You spoke at Rutgers at an event on economic justice. As part of your speech, you criticized the Republicans on this committee, comparing us to union busters. Now, you stated as follows, and I quote, "Despite the fact that multiple women credibly accused Kavanaugh of having sexually assaulted them, Senate Republicans allowed only one woman to come forward to testify. They ignored or belittled the other accusers. The fact that Dr. Ford was only one person allowed Republicans to pretend the situation was he said, she said. And these techniques were taken directly from the playbook of anti-union employers during union organizing campaigns. Now, I assume that you would have thought it would be more fair to the parties to have a panel of any person inclined to throw accusations at then Judge, now Justice Kavanaugh. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying?
Senator, good morning. Thank you for your question. When I made that speech, I was speaking at Rutgers University in my capacity as general counsel of the Service Employees International Union.
Right, but it was you speaking, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in response to my question, is that what you're saying? It would have been more fair to just put anybody up there willing to throw accusations at him?
Senator, I believe it falls to the members of this committee to decide and determine how judicial confirmation hearings take place. What I can tell you is that I believe Justice Kavanaugh, as every other justice of the Supreme Court, was legitimately confirmed. And were I to be so fortunate as to be confirmed, I would follow his opinions and the opinions of every justice.
Okay. I do take issue with your suggestion that we ignored or belittled anyone. I sit on this committee. I sat on this committee then. We went to great lengths to make sure that that we heard accusations. Now, would you consider a person's involvement in a system of covered-up sexual harassment something that should be disclosed in a nominations hearing?
Senator, the system for disclosure is quite lengthy. I know my colleague and I participated in lengthy reviews of our records and background investigations, and I trust the members of this committee to determine the appropriate process for review of nominees.
Now, your actions dealing with an SEIU sexual harassment scandal were outlined in an expose published by the Payday Report, a pro-labor website, in 2019. Whether or not you believe numerous women who accused the SEIU executives of sexual harassment, do you think it would have been important for you to disclose to this committee your involvement in that scandal?
Senator, I was general counsel. I was counsel to the Service Employees International Union at the time of the events that you are referencing. And as a lawyer for my client, I zealously advocated for my client in those matters as in every other matter.
Sure. Now, one of the women who was alleging to have been the victim of misconduct, sexual misconduct, by several of the men in leadership roles, in roles of significant authority within SEIU, including her SEIE UHW division director, who wrote a letter to which she responded. Now, in that letter, she begged you to come to a sworn deposition where she would be testifying. She would be providing sworn testimony about the alleged assaults against her by SEIU directors and executives so that you could reach your own conclusion as to whether there were problems within the union. Now, you responded, declining to attend or even investigate the matter, writing as follows, quote, "Because each local SEIU employs its own staff and sets its own personnel policies and protocols, the International Union does not have a direct role in investigating allegations or concerns that may arise in local unions regarding personnel matters." You also encouraged her to continue engaging with local staff. Primarily, what that meant was continuing to engage with the person she was accusing, with the guy she had accused of victimizing her. So why didn't you disclose your involvement in this issue, including and especially that part? I mean, that's not a realistic option, is it? To tell the victim, go talk to the person who's messing with you, who's harassing you, who's breaking the law. You didn't disclose that to the committee, did you?
Senator, I faithfully complied with all of the requests asked of me and required of me of disclosures. In my 25 years of practice of law, I have handled hundreds of matters, and I have done so zealously, as has been my professional obligation as an advocate. And I understand that sitting before you today, I am seeking a position as a neutral, and I would take the transition to that new position seriously and faithfully, and any position that I had taken in the past on behalf of a client would not influence any decision that I would make were I so fortunate as to be confirmed.
Dave Regan, who's still the president of that union, and still a vice president, he was one of the men most often accused, and he was allowed to use the union member's dues to defend himself. You think that was an appropriate use of the member's dues?
Senator, I am not counsel to the local union that you are referring to, and I'm not familiar with the facts that you referenced.
I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Berner, I want to pick up where Senator Graham left off. He read you a quote of yours where you say, at its core, the right to work movement is deeply racist. He asked you several times a simple yes or no statement. Is that what you said? And you refused to answer. So I'd like to ask you again. Did you say that the right to work movement is deeply racist?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to answer the question. In the speech I was giving, I was speaking about a historic.
Okay, so this is what you did with Senator Graham. It is a simple yes or no question. I'm not asking you about the context of it. I'm not asking you where you did it. I'm not asking what you were wearing that day. I'm saying, did you say that the right to work movement is deeply racist, yes or no?
Senator, the speech I was giving was about a historic.
Look, you're not coming off very well. You've been overcoached on this question. You knew that it was going to be raised. It is a simple yes or no question. By refusing to answer, I guess you're telling everyone up here that the answer is yes, you just don't want to admit that. You don't want it to be on tape in this hearing.
Senator, I believe that individuals who today support the right to work laws are not racist.
So did you say the right to work movement is deeply racist?
I was speaking about the history, the original history of that movement.
Yes or no, did you say the right to work movement is deeply racist?
Historically, the roots of the.
Yes or no, did you say that line?
Senator, I don't have the line of my speech in front of me. There were many lines in that speech.
Okay. Are people in Wisconsin deeply racist? They're right to work state.
Senator, as I mentioned.
Many Wisconsinites fell in the Civil War to free slaves. Were the people of Wisconsin deeply racist?
Senator, I do not believe that it can be said of the people of a state that they are racist, no.
Is the right to work law in Wisconsin deeply racist?
Senator, I'm not aware of the history of the specific laws in that state.
Okay, Mr. Mungy, same question, or I want to return, I should say, to Senator Graham. He asked you about your affiliation as a member of the advisory board for the Center of Security, Race and Rights at Rutgers Law School. It didn't pin down when you left that position.
Senator,
Said 2023, or he said, and you agreed. When exactly did you leave that position?
I believe I communicated it to the director in about June, perhaps May.
Okay. Why did you, after so many years of being affiliated with them, why did you leave in May or June?
Senator, I had views on certain academic areas that I thought the center should focus on. And my notion was that the center should be producing high-quality academic research regarding anti-Muslim bigotry that could then be used in civil rights litigation.
Okay.
The center, please.
Got it. Thank you. Senator Graham also pointed out some of the troubling events that the center has hosted, in fact, hosting someone convicted of support for terrorism. Just 3 days after Hamas's brutal atrocity against Jews in Israel, they hosted a talk at Rutgers about practicing resistance in Palestine. It opened by saying, quote, "It's impossible to give this talk without centering and reminding us how settler colonialism, and in this case particular Zionist settler colonialism, is a structure that is the provocation," end quote. Now, I agree with Senator Booker's points. You can't have attributed to you every single event or statement or conference where you sit a member of an advisory board or have in the past. So I just want to give you a chance to respond directly to that statement. Do you believe that Zionist settler colonialism was a provocation that justified Hamas's atrocity against Jews in Israel?
Senator, thank you for an opportunity to address that. Let me be very direct and unequivocal on this issue because it's a vitally important issue. The events of October 7th were horrific, a horror. The attacks on civilians were abominable and against everything that I stand for. So
Okay.
I have no patience for any attempts to justify or defend those
Thank you.
attacks on civilians.
Do you believe that Jews are colonial settlers in Israel?
Senator, I have the utmost respect for Jewish Americans who I have worked with deeply, who
I didn't
have
ask about
lifted
Jewish
me up.
Americans. I asked about Jews living in Israel. Do you believe they're colonial settlers, Jews in Israel?
Senator, the the conflict in Israel raises issues of policy. I'm not
Mr. Mungy,
from...
this is getting back to what I was saying with Ms. Berner. This is a simple yes or no question. Are Jews in Israel colonial settlers?
Senator, I don't feel qualified to opine on that because it's not a region whose history I've studied or where I'm from.
Ms. Berner, one final question, kind of related. You signed an amicus brief in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, also known as the Bake the Cake Bigot case, in which a man in Colorado who had a bake shop didn't want to bake a cake for a gay marriage. The Supreme Court ruled in his favor. Let me ask you, if pro-Hamas radicals went into a cake shop, say a Jewish bakery, and said, we want a cake on it that says Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, and it had a dagger drawn through the Star of David, would that Jewish baker be compelled to bake that cake under your view of the law?
Senator, the Supreme Court ruled in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case that the baker's right to freedom of religion gave that baker the right to deny.
To be exact, they ruled that the Colorado Commission had not applied the law neutrally. They later ruled in the 303 Creative case that a website designer had that right, but I'm asking you specifically about a cake baker, same thing, in which you said he did not have that right. Would a Jewish baker be compelled to make a cake that says Palestine will be free from the river to the sea with a dagger through the Star of David?
Senator, the Supreme Court in the Bostock case did not rule along the lines of, in the Masterpiece Cake case, did not rule along the lines that was advocated by my client. The brief that you are referencing was a brief that I submitted on behalf of my client. And were I to be so fortunate to be confirmed, I would, of course, apply that Supreme Court precedent like every other Supreme Court precedent or Fourth Circuit precedent that was relevant to the facts that came before me.
Well, I guess if you're confirmed, we'll have to see if pro-Hamas radicals want such a cake baked.